All right, everybody, we're going to get into Chapter 2, CSI and Evidence. This is going to be the last chapter in this first introduction unit. What we'll do is I'll go through and I'll sort of quickly recap about the first 10 slides or so, and I will have you still write down the notes for all of the slides, and then we'll go through and we'll talk in further depth when I get back to class with what's going on with this chapter. So right here we've got some things that you'll be able to do by the time we finish chapter 2. You will be able to summarize Locard's exchange principle, identify 4 examples of trace evidence, distinguish between direct and circumstantial evidence, identify different professionals who are present at a crime scene, state the 7 S's of a crime scene investigation, explain the importance of securing the crime scene, identify methods by which crime scene is documented, demonstrate proper technique in collecting and packaging evidence, and describe how evidence from a crime scene is analyzed. As you can see, there's a lot of things that we're going to be able to do before the end of this chapter. We will do a big lab activity where we will actually go through and we'll solve sort of a mock crime, and we'll go through the process of gathering evidence, following Locard's exchange principle, and really putting into practice some of those things. So the principle of exchange, Dr. Edmund Lockwood established this idea of the exchange principle. So if a person comes in contact with an object or another person, a cross transfer of physical material can occur. So for example, if you were to bump into somebody else, what they're saying is that some physical material from you can go onto that other person. That could be threads from a sweater, that could be skin cells just from bumping into one another. Those things can happen. And then the second part of this principle is the study of material can determine the nature and the duration of the transfer. So depending on what they can gather from that evidence can determine how that interaction happened, how long the exchange was, and some further details with that. Here you can see a graphic organizer in regards to evidence. I will tell you right now, this graphic organizer will be on your test for this first unit. It will be exactly like this. You will have a word bank and you will need to complete this. After we learn some of this stuff and put it into practice, this will make complete sense. Right now, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So under evidence, we have all evidence, and then we have direct evidence and circumstantial or indirect evidence. Let's start with direct evidence. That's the stuff we've talked about already with our chapter 1 notes talking about first-hand observations. The second category deals with circumstantial or indirect evidence, and those things can either be physical or biological. Physical would deal with fibers, maybe from a carpet or a sweater, or ballistics. Ballistics have to do with ammunition, guns, and weapons of that nature. And then we have biological evidence, which falls under the circumstantial category as well. This includes blood, hair, and plant material. So anything that comes from a living material would be biological circumstantial evidence. Trace evidence is a type of circumstantial evidence. So an example would be hair found on a brush, soil tracked into a house from your shoes, blood drops on a shirt, a very small amount of evidence. Okay, we know that evidence can be divided into class evidence and individual evidence. It's very important that you know the difference between these two. Class evidence narrows information down to a group of people, such as blood type. So if I was to say the person who committed the crime had type A blood, there are multiple people in our classroom who have type A blood. That does not tell me the one specific person who did the crime, but it does help me narrow down my search pool to the 5 or 6 people in our classroom who would have type A blood. Individual evidence points us to one specific person, something such as fingerprints or DNA. Okay, so those things will be specific to that one individual. So evidence is taken from a crime scene. It can be direct or circumstantial. It can be physical or biological, class or individual. Explain why this would be or would not be trace evidence. So our example here that you see is fingerprints. So I want you to think, would fingerprints be direct or circumstantial evidence? Would they be physical or biological evidence? Would they be class or individual evidence? Okay, think about that a little bit here. It'll help you identify what category fingerprints fall into. The crime scene investigation team. So this is who is at the crime scene after a crime occurs. Typically, the first people to show up are the police and possibly a district attorney. A crime scene investigator, sometimes referred to as CSI. Medical examiners, also referred to oftentimes as an ME. Detectives and specialists. So those are people who are present at a crime scene in order to start investigating. The CSI team. The police officers are the first to arrive. If a search warrant is needed, then a district attorney will also be present. The crime scene investigators are responsible to document and collect evidence. The medical examiners, also known as coroners, they are responsible for determining the cause of death. So what caused the person to die? And then detectives are there to interview witnesses, and they bring in specialists. This could be a psychologist, an entomologist. They may be called if needed. Not always, but depending on the situation, they will be in contact with these specialists if they need their assistance. 7 S's of a crime scene investigation. This can be found on page 24 and 25. Okay, you want to secure the scene, separate the witnesses. We don't want them to be sharing stories with one another. Remember what we learned about eyewitness testimony, how your brain fills in the gaps? We don't want those gaps to be filled in with other people's ideas. Scan the scene, see what was going on, make sure that you sort of gather all the evidence that you think might not necessarily be important. See to it that the crime scene examiners receive overall and close-up photos with and without measuring rulers of all of the evidence and the crime scene. Sketch the scene, search for evidence, and secure the collected evidence. This slide number 10 is just looking for you to create a mnemonic phrase to help you remember the 7 S's. A mnemonic phrase is something very similar to when we were doing metric conversions in physical science and we said kangaroos hopping down mountains drinking chocolate milk so that you could remember what order the metric system comes in. That's just all a mnemonic device is. You don't necessarily need to do that unless it would help you. I'm going to stop right here. We will practice packaging evidence. Probably on Friday when we get back to class. And I'll bring in some items for us to place in and create our bindle. Creating a bindle is going to be very important because when we do our lab activity next week, we will have to put our evidence into the bindles and secure them in that manner in order to follow Locker's exchange principle. A few reminders for the remainder of the week. As you know, I'm out today because my husband is getting his wisdom teeth out. It is my goal that I will be back to school on Wednesday if all goes well with his wisdom teeth removal. Wednesday, please make sure that you bring a book to read. We will also have Taylor from the Career Center in to give a presentation to us on Wednesday. Thursday, we will have the counselors in and we will be selecting electives for next school year. Those of you who are seniors and you are planning on graduating, You need to show up to class on Thursday. You need to check in with me so that I know where you're at, and then I will dismiss you to the commons. If you do not come to class on Thursday, seniors, I will mark you absent, which will then turn into a truancy if you are skipping class. Please show up. I will dismiss you as soon as I know that you are there, but I need to check in with you so we are on the same page. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. Please make sure that you do finish writing down the notes for the remainder of this PowerPoint. You are going to be responsible for that, to have that done. It's very important that we have that done so we don't miss out on class time. Thanks, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.